Hi, Donna.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. It's Tuesday.
Right?
I woke up
Are,
this morning thinking it was Wednesday and it's still Tuesday.
oh, dang it.
I know.
Are you going to do so Steve's going from a meeting right straight into us. Are you going to do the kind of housekeeping, updating type things? Yes, or you have
Yes.
to do something? You got it? Perfect.
Yeah, I can do that. I have a little list of stuff. So
Perfect.
I'll do the announcements at the beginning.
Perfect.
And then his intro. I'm assuming he just wants us to read his bio, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
That works for me.
Cool. That's perfect. Perfect. Hi, Yael.
Hi, good morning, ladies. How are you?
Good.
Donna, I'm sorry it gave you that message. I don't know why, because it's set up that you don't really need a host.
Oh, okay.
But I made you the co-host, so I'll just do that from now on, just in case.
Yeah, that works.
Okay.
I'm wondering if someone was trying to log in and was entering the wrong password or something.
Well, that's what it looked like because I got a code to verify who it was. Like it said, oh, you're logging in from a different computer onto the main account. So it's not going to be a problem, but just for future, I'll just make you a co-host just so we don't have any problems and
That
you
works.
kind of have the reins.
Cookies, but you can give them a promo code to each one, and then you can track and trace how
All
many
right, well, have a good meeting.
Thank
Very
you.
nice, and you can do
I'm
one
here if
time,
you need anything, but I'm going to log off.
Okay.
whatever that looks like for you, what makes sense. Again, we work with a lot of colleges and universities, so we've really managed, and private
Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Just give it a few minutes for everyone to get a chance to log in. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I am super excited about today's presentation on leading up, down, and sideways. Dr. Burrell will be with us in just a moment, but I do have a couple announcements for everyone. First, I hope that I'm going to see all of you at PI next week. SWAPTA will be there as well. We'll be at the registration booth and then have some great surprises for you at the award ceremony. We do have a really busy schedule coming up. So in June, we'll have a webinar. So watch your emails for invitations. It's going to be on EV readiness, presented by Walker. So that'll be great. And then in July, we're going to have a frontline training session in Denver. So we'll be sending out information on that very soon, within the next day or two. So look for that. And then our Las Vegas conference is October 24th to 26th. Be sure, sorry, I was just seeing Julie's note. Be sure and look for a contest associated with our conference at PI. So to get free registration. And then if you don't already know, you can get free registration to PI if you haven't already registered. The code is in the chat box by Julie, that's been posted by Julie. So to get started, I will give you some information on our speaker today. Stephen Burrell is Vice President and Chief Information Officer at Northern Arizona University. He has 35 years of higher education technology leadership experience. Dr. Burrell began his career at Colorado State University and held the top IT leadership position at Hutchinson Community College, Plymouth State University, St. Leo University, and Georgia Southern University. Burrell is a lifelong learner, earning a Bachelor of Science degree in Computer Science from Sterling College, a Master of Education degree in Technology Administration from Plymouth State University, an Education Specialist degree in Leadership from Georgia Southern University, and a Doctor of Higher Education Leadership from Georgia Southern University. Burrell is also a graduate of the Harvard University College of Education Institute for Educational Management. His research interests are in the humanizing aspects of technology and leadership development, and is currently conducting qualitative research of gender bias as barriers to aspiring women IT leaders. Dr. Burrell is also a principal investigator on 2 National Science Foundation grants to connect small colleges to research networks. In his career, Burrell has led a wide variety of successful projects and services, including worldwide education initiatives, national competitive grants to improve integrated planning and advising for student success, statewide multi-institution shared services, innovations in teaching, discovery, research, and performance capabilities, and statewide infrastructure development, among many others. Burrell's passion for technology and higher learning has created opportunities for fostering future generations of college graduates, responsible digital citizens, and community leaders. Students under his mentorship have produced Emmy Award-winning programming and have created cutting-edge technology business enterprises. He is passionate about creating future leaders and fostering the next generation of CIOs and education leaders. Burrell is active in his profession, serving on local, state, government, and national technology research, in addition to advisory roles for private business and education organizations. Community outreach is another one of Burrell's passions, having served as the board chair and the president of Rotary International Club, Ogeechee Hospice, and other organizations acting on behalf of animal rights and rescue. He formerly served on the board for the Center for Higher Education CIO Studies, and as the chairman of the Sun Corridor Network, he is currently serving on the CenturyLink National Technical Advisory Board, Microsoft Higher Education Advisory Board, Highland CIO Advisory Board, and Salesforce Higher Education CIO Advisory Board. And with that, it looks like Dr. Burrell has arrived. So welcome. I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Donna. I appreciate that. That was a marvelously long introduction. I have to remember to thank my mother for writing that for me, but very, very nice of you to introduce me. So good to be back with you again. Seems like COVID has, upset the timeline of all things, but gosh, I remember a couple of years ago presenting to you on a few things. And so it's a real privilege to be asked to come back and share some things. Today, I'm going to share a screen here. We're going to run through some slides. I'm going to share a few things with you. Hang on, let's get this thing going. We're going to talk about managing and leading 360. Basically, a lot of people ask us, how do I influence others? How do I, persuade people to do things that I want them to do? And all of us are persuading or encouraging, or we're selling, whether it's, something on a project, maybe it's something to our staff, a new procedure, or to peers and even our own supervisors and bosses. So a lot of times we've heard this terminology about managing up. Not everybody's comfortable doing it. What I want to do today is explore, 3 particular things, and we're going to deep dive on one issue that might help you with your ability to influence and manage people in 360 degrees. And we ask ourselves, why is this important? Well, we are very accustomed to leading down. Many of us have subordinates that report to us. And so this is something we're very familiar with. We're less familiar, perhaps, or even comfortable with leading up, but we all have to do it. We're all taking the opportunity to inform our supervisors, our leadership. We're all providing our influences and our experiences to try and get them to make decisions, whether it's budget or a project or more FTEs or whatever. And we're going to unpack what some of those issues are today too, so we can hear from each other. And we also have to lead across our institutions and our organizations, right? There are people in the IT organization, or there's people over in HR, or other people that we have to collaborate with. The point here is that not everybody can do everything all on their own. We have to have these relationships. We have to be able to manage and lead in 360. And those 2 terms today are being used synonymously. Management, good management is good leadership. Good leadership has management components. So I'll interchange the 2 quite a bit today. But this is the topic that we're talking about. And yourself is always right in the middle of these relationships. And so we're going to unpack that a little bit for you today. A lot of people say, hey, Steve, I'm not really comfortable leading 360. I'm not comfortable managing my boss. What does that even mean? If I just put my head down and do my work and do what I'm told to do, I don't raise any hackles. I don't upset anybody. I get paid and I go home. And that's well and good. And some of us, may choose to do that. Yet really, if we're doing our role and job as a service, everybody is managing up. And in fact, I expect my people who report to me to manage up to me, to help me make better decisions and so on and so forth. So I think in the modern organizational worlds, right, we kind of do away with these Newtonian ideas of strict structures and, following reporting lines. And there's more of a collaborative spirit, more of an integrative approach to management and leading and learning, doing execution, all involves working across in all directions. But managing up certainly promotes our team's ability to have strategic impacts. Aligning what we can do with what needs to be done is a simple act of managing up. Managing across is about building influence. It's about building trust. It's about facilitating collaboration. It's about bringing disparate groups together to share a common experience. And it's about you as a central leader or manager in sharing your emphasis and sharing your influences and your lived experiences with others, so that we can celebrate and include more diverse thought in our processes and influence the outcomes of all things good. And of course, effectively managing down, many of us have been through management classes before. It's about creating employee engagement. And we shouldn't, remiss the fact that people are, again, managing up to us, and we should be prepared for that as well. So it's not about manipulating others. It's about being authentic, engaged, collaborative, and ultimately helpful in 360 degrees. So the attributes of a 360 leader, right, is again, just starting out with being available and present. It's not about micromanaging or manipulating. It's about knowing what's important to others that are around you, developing empathy and sharing and trying to learn others' perspectives on particular issues while you're also trying to influence them about your ideas and lived experiences. It's about leveraging the diversity of the us versus, the thems that are out there, and for many of us, holding divergent and contradictory views in our own minds during problem solving without getting defensive, but really embracing new thought and new ways of doing things. Still looking for that opportunity to inject our expertise and point of view. It's about following up. It's about executing. It's about making promises and keeping them. And it's all about building trust. It's about also being proactive, getting out ahead of things, being collegial and giving somebody a heads up in a relationship you might have with a colleague, offering to be helpful, and being contextually aware and mindful of when people are open for input. I use this analogy, right? I think I'm a Star Trek fan. I've loved Star Trek since I was a child. And I always remember as a kid, right, the first time we encountered the Klingons, right, the shields went up and everybody got defensive about it. Well, the answer to that is not to shoot more photon torpedoes, more lasers, phasers, and things at people. But, this expression that with people slow can be fast. So when people put up those, defense shields and they're not ready to hear your ideas or to engage, in some kind of conversation, which you intend to influence, with people slow as fast. So back off. It doesn't do more good to keep hammering away at somebody, talking louder, being more emphatic. Typical kinds of mistakes we see when people are trying to get their point across. So contextually aware when people are ready for the message. So 3 strategies we're gonna dive down into. Mapping relationships. First of all, who is important in your influence circle, right? Who do you need to have relationships with to be successful in your organization? Being mindful and identifying those individuals and mapping those relationships is a key fundamental step to a 360 leadership. Mapping the topics that matter. What are the topics that matter to these individuals that you're trying to influence? Put yourself in their shoes a little bit and try to identify the things and the ways in which things go to them. And then people map. We're going to unpack individuals a little bit and how they like to receive information. So identifying those individuals in your relationship mapping, figuring out what issues matter to them most, and then talking their language. 3 distinct, interrelated, and important strategies, the 360 leadership. So relationship mapping, you can Google that and you can get a ton of information out there about different tools and things to do. The simple thing to do is sit down with a sheet of paper, put yourself in the middle, and draw lines to individuals that you need to have a strong working relationship with. because you need to influence them, or you need to serve them in a better way, or you're trying to manage a situation. Maybe it's a project or something, but identifying specifically those individuals and what the relationship is to you and perhaps to each other. So you can sit down, and there's a couple of links here, and we'll get these slides out to you afterwards so you can dive down into it. But be mindful in thinking about who I need to have strong working relationships with, either current, future, or better, maybe different. So when we get into these kinds of conversations, right, we also have to have awareness that as we manage 360 to different levels, we need to kind of understand where they're coming from. Chief executive officers, senior vice presidents of organizations tend to be more at a very strategic level. They're dealing with broad issues around vision and strategies, and they tend to focus more outward than inward in a lot of cases. Senior directors or the director level, somewhere in between, frontline managers and the executives, start to take on more tactical kinds of questions. They tend to be more focused on aspects of the vision in terms of implementation, and they begin to focus more inward all the way down. So we've got this kind of funnel effect going on in terms of the kinds of things. What this would do, frankly, would be to inform us that, not every chief executive officer is going to be really interested in the kinds of minutia things that maybe you bring to them. We have to be mindful about that kind of thing. And so if you're going to effectively have that relationship and build that ability to influence those people who are making key decisions, perhaps you're on a committee or there's some, kind of task force work going on, then you need to think about where they're coming from. What are they thinking about, and what kind of information can they use? Okay. Now, and we also move on into topics, right? Mapping the topics that are important to them. Excuse me, I wanted to get back to, I hit the fat finger down. We want to identify topics that are important to them and map those to the individuals, right? So, clearly as an IT officer, I'm really concerned about IT components. My enrollment management colleague is really, concerned specific about enrollment. There are probably some intersecting issues that we're working on together. And so I want to understand those topics from their point of view. I think we've got chat enabled here. And what I'd like for you to do is to use the chat room. And let me see if I can get back to that. Let me stop share for a second. Pull up the chat room. What are the kinds of issues that you in your roles here are dealing with right now in terms of, trying to manage up or manage laterally or even manage down? What are some of the big issues? If you would, put them in the chat. You don't have to explain them. I'm just trying to see and understand what kinds of issues you might be doing. One issue, for example, that I'm dealing with right now is dealing with the relationships of how we share data among community colleges. And so I'm having to manage up and across peers at the university and among institutions to have conversations and influence them about things. Darby, thank you. Information sharing, right? I mean, it's the same thing that I'm doing. How do we share information around? What are some of the other issues? I'm really interested to have you do. Hiring, thank you, Donna, right? Personnel issues. Having good relationships with HR right now is hugely valuable. Thank you, Maria. New supervisors in need of leadership skills. How do we develop our new employees and new supervisors to have these kinds of skills in their bag? Any other issues here? Micromanagement, both me of my direct reports and me of my senior manager. Thanks. That's an honest. In other words, too much micromanagement going on, or we're trying to avoid it. Yeah, micromanagement can be an underminer for a lot of things we want to do. Okay, thank you for sharing some of those. Well, we want to think about the issues that we're managing in this 360 environment. Of course, they're all centered around you and your particular role and the things you're trying to do. Let's go back to our screen sharing here. We'll press on. Get a few things out of the way. Here we go. So we want to be cognizant of not only who we are influencing in our circles, right, our 360 circles, but what are the things that matter to them and you? What are the kinds of topics that maybe your supervisor is bringing to you to resolve? New problems, these kinds of things. We also want to map those things out. So overlaying your relationship management should be your issues management. What are the kinds of issues do you want to talk to these individuals about to manage situations, improve your situation or the relationships that you have? Then we move on to specific relationship building and communication. There are some general rules here that I have found work really, really well when trying to manage up and across peers. Communicating to your audience, incorporating that audience's preferences and understanding what others consider to be important, right? This is outcrop of the issues mapping. And then developing the courage and the skills to communicate with and persuade senior leaders. I'll tell you a short story. The governor of Georgia was coming to give a commencement address at a university I worked with there. And he had just gone through a week of announcements about the importance of STEM education and the need to have more engineers and scientists, and really was kind of poo-pooing and downplaying some of the other degrees. Yet here he is standing in a ready room as the stage party is ready to go to graduation. And nobody wants to talk to the governor. They're afraid. Fortunately, I'd met the governor as a Rotary brother and had had the opportunity to, and so I really wasn't intimidated too much there. So I walked over to him. He was standing alone with his attaché, and I said, "Governor, thank you for coming to give this presentation today. You do realize that, and oh, by the way, I caught your messaging around STEM and those degrees and how important it is to Georgia going forward. Really well said and nicely done. But, you know, you do realize that you're about to give a commencement speech to a bunch of liberal arts grads, not the engineering college." And it kind of caught him by surprise a little bit. And I said, "But I know you can pivot really well on this because many of those individuals are going to be in supportive roles of a lot of those engineers and whatnot as Georgia pivots to a film industry at the time, et cetera, et cetera." So we had a nice conversation about him not getting booed off the stage and how he might, address some of the connections between the importance of liberal arts grads. Well, later on the stage, he's giving his thing. He altered it. He went off script. I got turn around and wink and a nod and appreciation. But here's understanding several things, right? Communicating to your audience and having the courage to do it. I had the courage to go talk to the governor when nobody else in the room wanted to. And maybe I, influenced him in a positive way to, talk about another aspect of something that might have been controversial. I was managing up. I was managing way up that day. And he became more sensitive to communicating to the audience that he was in front of. Always very, very, very important when we're building relationships and trying to be effective in influencing people. So, and again, building relationships and networking is something we want to do not in the spur of the moment, but in a thoughtful and mindful way to go have conversations, to build those relationships, to build those personal networks when we don't need them, when things are relatively calm and the conversations are easy. When we're not in the middle of a crisis of COVID or when we're not in the middle of a project, to have built those relationships around some easy topics during easy times makes them much more accessible when we need them. Using our emotional intelligence. We've heard a lot about EQ in the past year or so, about how important it is to express empathy and to strengthen working relationships. There's a lot you can Google on building emotional intelligence. And if you'd like more information or you'd like a separate seminar on that, I'd be happy to do it. Active listening is a skill, again, you can Google out there, but being mindful and seeking first to understand, then be understood, to greatly paraphrase Stephen Covey, is really what active listening is all about. And then crisis communication, being mindful and planful of those key relationships that we need during a crisis. The computer system's down, there's a pandemic. I've had a lot of turnover in my staff and we're not able to keep up with the work. But if we've built those relationships ahead of time and we've talked about how we will communicate during a crisis and we've practiced that on a day in and day out basis, then that 360 capability comes into play extremely well and extremely powerful for you as we work through crisis. And the final thing is we need to speak their language. Learn to speak the language of those people that you want to influence, and you'll find that you're able to build a deeper relationship and be more effective in communicating both ways in terms of working through the business at hand and the opportunities in front of us. Many of us learned the golden rule in Bible school or perhaps from parents or other places, but the golden rule was do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And that works well as we're two of the very same kinds of people with the same kinds of expectations. When we speak their language, we really want to employ the platinum rule, which is treat others the way they want to be treated. So what do we mean by this? Well, one of the mappings that we can do is called the people map. And the mapping there basically assigns people to one of four types. Like many other instruments for developing people's types, DISC, Myers-Briggs, True Colors, Strengths Quest, etc. This follows a traditional four archetype leadership model, or a personality model, excuse me. And it's pretty easy to understand. Generally, people are either predominantly a leader type, a task type, a people, or a free spirit. We don't have time today to fully dive into this, so I'm going to take you into the shortcuts. And if you'd like to do and explore more about the people map, or perhaps train a small group of people at your institution, I'm happy to do it and do it for free. But basically, we arrive at a very simple instrument that identifies our major motivators, our inborn strengths, and our blind spots or Achilles heel, and these transformational new strengths. When we're trying to map the relationships with people and use the platinum rule to speak in a way or approach people in a way that they're most receptive to, then we need to take into account their strengths and motivators. For the leader type, these are the people in our lives that are, natural born leaders. They see the big picture. They're very competitive and results driven. It's all about sometimes the bottom line. They're motivated by results and accomplishment, and they certainly have a future orientation, typically very self-confident, and take charge. Sometimes their Achilles heels is being insensitive or not listening well to others. Well, if you know somebody who's a leader type and you want to tailor your communication and your interaction with them, then you want to be bright, be brief, and be gone. I've worked for a lot of presidents in my career, and many of them are leader types. And you don't have to be a leader type to be a good leader, but it's kind of like a self-fulfilling role, right? If I'm a leader type, I'm looking for leader type roles. And so you'll find a lot of propensity for leader types who are in big leadership positions. But with them, you want to get to the point quickly, don't waste time, connect with their vision, discuss outcomes, and certainly they don't like surprises. Remember, they're all about the big picture and being results driven. So if you know somebody who's a leader type and you're trying to manage up to them, right, these are some of the points that we can use in how we engage in conversation. If you've got your radar out there and you're sensing and you're watching body language and you're watching the nature of the communication, and you're trying these tactics and they don't work, we'll switch to another one. or simply put, ask somebody how they would like to be communicated with, if at all. But we'll find that leader types, right, generally want you to kind of get to the point and move on. People types, these are the people in our lives who are, they're all about team players. They're very sensitive to others. They're very supportive. They got this emotional radar that's out there all the time. And their major motivator is relationships. So you'll want to, connect with their emotional self. They're highly communicative. You'll find it very easy to talk with these people, and they're all about helpfulness. They can be conflict avoidant, and they can be sensitive to criticism. So we might have to gauge the level of maturity of this people type person if we're doing it. Anyway, some of the things that you can do when mapping to this particular person, the kinds of communications you want to do is typically be friendly and sociable. 2/3 of everybody out there have some people component in their personality. So obviously it can always be a good idea to open with something friendly and sociable. If it's just a simple, hey, how are you doing today? Glad to see that you're well, before we move into the business. But if we're dealing with a deep people type, we'll want to focus our conversation on teams and teamworks. We're going to want to identify people we can praise. You want to be sharing of yourself and your own thoughts and perspectives on things. Again, we're back to expressing empathy. And people types want you to be close. They want you to be loyal. They want you to deeply share. So thinking about the person in the relationship and the issues that they have, when we're talking with people, people will want to be very social in nature and talk about the welfare of the group. The free spirit, these are the people in our lives who have 1,000 ideas and have no idea how to implement them. They're adventurous and fun. They seek the adrenaline of change. They like creativity and new ideas, and they can be very, very good problem solvers. Their motivation is freedom. Don't fence me in is their theme song. And their 3 strengths are, the adventure and the excitement of something new, being out of the box creativity, or, solving that impossible problem that nobody else could with some new innovative idea. They do lack follow through sometimes, and they certainly can resist authority. So we want to treat them carefully as we go forward. But when you go and you talk to a free spirit and you want to connect with them, let's talk about all of our great ideas and opportunities. And "our" is the key word there, because they're going to bring a lot of energy and ideas, and you need to be able to match that. You need to be open to their new ideas. A good listener, right? Maybe pursue some of the things that they're interested in talking about. But understand they're going to get bored with a long, drawn out conversation. So keep it going. And obviously, they like to be listened to. You'll need to have some patience to listen to their ideas. Again, free spirits can be a lot of fun to talk to, and they'll need help with execution. The task type, finally, task types are the people in your lives who make lists. They're rule followers. They follow the procedure. They don't necessarily like change unless they can clearly see that the change is for the good. They're extraordinarily dependable and reliable. They bring jobs to completion, and it's all about creating better systems for them. They can be workaholics. They can be really rigid and inflexible. So when we're talking to them, we want to make sure that we're being logical and bringing in the details. And by all means, the task people will know that you were a minute late to the meeting. So be punctual. Have the details in mind. Be prepared to talk to those or pull out documents or get them to, and talk about systems and how we can change things and the systems of things, because they really want to create order out of chaos. And they want things to be dependable and reliable and bring jobs to completion. These, again, are their major motivators. So we've mapped the people, we've mapped the relationships we want to people to help us manage 360 and be great influencers in our organization. We've mapped and talked about the issues that are of importance to people, because those are the kinds of things we probably need to be prepared to speak to them about. in addition to the ones that I want to. And we've kind of looked at 4 types, the leader type, the people type, the free spirit, and the task type, as to how to shape specific people maps in the conversations that we're going to have with them. So we want to be aware of our own type too, and how you want to relate to them. Be conscious of their type, and you can pretty well guess, if you know these people, which of these categories are in, or pull these sheets back up, and or just to ask them straight up how they like to be communicated with. But to talk their people map language to enhance communication, and talk in their language of acronyms that they're familiar with. I don't want to lead out talking to a president about the technical details of some Cisco router that we're dealing with. I want to lead out with a conversation about the value of the network and how we're going to improve the access and the experience of students. So match the talk, match the issues, match the level, and you'll do much, much better in terms of building authentic and relationships. So here again, we have, there's a bunch of self-assessment questions here that you'll get in these slides when I send them to Donna for distribution. But you can kind of do a self-assessment here. And if you feel like any one of these 18 different questions is not something, that you're particularly strong in, you can work to identify these things through various training activities and whatnot. And I'd be happy to come back and speak to one or more of any of these with you and run you through a specific exercise. But there's a lot of self-examination in this as you try to move that. Now, going back to people types, and then I'm going to open it up for a couple of questions and ideas here from the audience. We realize that not everybody, we've used the people map. I've used it to teach several thousand IT people in my career. Overall, the over 1 million people have taken this particular instrument. And we know that people are rarely any one thing. Like I said, leader types generally are affinitive to leadership roles, and they're big vision, outcomes based, change strategy motivations are often colored with another personality type. So we have found that there's combinations of these things, which typically define most of us much better. So we can think about a leader people type and the combination of that. And we know about 9% of the population is that. Of course, the leader type is going to want big visionary types of things. He's going to want, or she's going to want, concise conversation about outcomes, but we're going to want to do it in the context of people and teamwork and other things. So you can pretty well get a feel for, if your supervisor is a leader people type, but just by the nature of the conversations you have and the things in their office. I've worked for a lot of leader task presidents. It's about 18% of the population. For them, it's all about the bottom line, the big vision, and the steps to get there. Their offices are generally very neat and very organized. Their presentations, are very, very crisp, and as are the conversations. Whereas the leader people presidents I've served and other colleagues, right, you can walk into their office and you'll see a lot of pictures of family and friends and relationships and things that maybe they've done, but rarely will you see an individual picture of anybody in their office. It's always a family, it's always a group, it's always a team orientated. So we can think about these combinations. And in the handouts that I've given to you, I've got specific advice on these different kinds of people. So leader, if you were going in to talk to someone who is a leader people type, we know that they like to build team spirit and they enjoy growth opportunities for everybody, as well as the results and motivating people to do really great work. So how would I relate to them and communicate with them? How would I influence them and build a relationship of trust and authenticity? Well, first of all, it's to be close. If I'm not a particularly warm individual and I'm uncomfortable with that, try to get comfortable. I mean, fake it if you have to, but be loyal and be friendly not only with them, but the other people around them, and try to engender that really strong team spirit as you're working and interacting with them. They're not as interested in the details of a project as, say, the leader task might be. And they want to get things accomplished, of course, but they like to do that by motivating others to excel. And when you're dealing with differences, you can simply deal with them openly and very diplomatically, because they're accustomed to conflict within people relationships and the natural things that go with that. If you're managing down and you've got somebody who's a people type, leader people type, or across in your organization, the same things apply. It doesn't matter where their position's at. These are personal preferences, using the platinum rule to engage people. And I've got a bunch of them in here that we can go through and share and talk about. We don't have time today to probably unpack every one of these, but let's talk about something that's maybe a little different. What about that people free spirit person? We all know them. Maybe we've got them on our staffs. It's a colleague. They're very personable and people orientated, but they have a lot of crazy ideas, and they're not so much detail orientated or big goals type of thing. They're about getting there together and doing it well together. They can be kind of adventuresome. How to relate to those people? Well, again, they're people types, so we want to be sociable and friendly. We want to acknowledge their need to probably be of service to others. We want to praise people generously, and be sharing of yourself. Don't be distant. Be open to their new ideas and be diplomatic in dealing with the differences. Again, that free-spirited coloring of that is they're typically going to bring lots of ideas to the table, and they're looking for partners to help them realize those things. So there's a little bit different attitude in looking at that. Dilbert's probably one of the best teachers of things out there, particularly for somebody in my role as a CIO. And I just love some of these things that come out and are associated with these people types. Very ancient knowledge, very common type wisdom, seldom practiced. So again, we go through a bunch of these kinds of things. Let me also share a last concept, and then we'll open it up for some questions here in the last 15 minutes. Typically, when we're trying to influence people, we're trying to manage 360. I'm trying to manage up to get my president or my supervisor or somebody to understand this really great idea I've got and to set aside some additional funding. As we go through life, clearly conflicts arise, right? And we may be in conflict. We may be seeing things very differently from points of view. But if you're genuinely wanting to have a relationship with somebody that's enjoyable and you can work together, you need to resolve these conflicts. And there are generally three types of approaches. The direct approach, which works really, really well with people who like a direct approach, which would be our leader types probably, is to focus on those results about how to get the job done. They start with the end in mind, in many cases, and put their cards on the table in a very objective manner. This is a non-emotional thing for them, and hopefully not for you if you're trying to really resolve the conflict. So, work in a straightforward way at the risk of creating an I win approach. We always have to be thinking about team step. Otherwise, task people love to do things step by step. They like to see a plan for resolving problems. They will want to move more slowly, perhaps methodically, with these very clear paths to resolution. And so, when you're talking with people about how to resolve a problem or an issue, if you're dealing with a task type, you definitely want to resolve it through a step-by-step kind of approach. And then finally, a harmonizer. Well, again, this is probably our people types coming out. A strong commitment to finding win-win situations for you and building a relationship with them. intuitive and frequently focused on more on feelings than facts. So this is where, if you want to resolve conflict with somebody who prefers harmonizing, which is typically people, you've got to bring your empathy to the table and be willing to get close to the issue and talk about people's emotions. And we realize that not everybody, right? Because as a task type, I may not be particularly comfortable talking about emotions, but this is the secret to really influencing and managing people in 360, is building your own strengths across all of those different people types to be able to effectively lead up, down, and across your organization. So that's a lot to take in. I'm going to be really glad to get you the slides so you can go back and review. Let's take a moment. We'll stop sharing and we'll just see what kinds of questions we might have here in chat that I haven't been able to keep up with, or what kinds of questions you'd like to have for me regarding our ability to manage and lead 360 degrees. So let's see, Darby, if you have a director, high supervisor, and a second assistant director, next level supervisor, how do you see mixing the need to build a relationship for one and just information for the other to get the job done without hurting feelings and frustration? Well, I think, you have a director, high supervisor, and a second assistant director. How do you see mixing the needs to build a relationship? Well, Darby, I think you can build a relationship with both. And I think if you're working with that mid-person assistant level and you're trying to work up above them, you don't want to, by purposefully, try to manipulate a situation and work around them, right? I think one of the techniques I've seen work pretty well and has worked well for me is typically I might be a chief of staff between me and the president. And so I need to be able to work first and foremost really well with the chief of staff, and then partner on working on my relationship with the person above that person. In my case, it was a president, but this can happen at any level. You want to avoid situations and scenarios where you're being perceived as working around people. So I intend to work to and through people because, I can probably help them move their agenda forward too in some kind of partnership. So I would look to understand both individuals, primarily focus on the one that's closest to me in my relationship map, and then tertiarily work with that individual so to help me with my relationship with that other person. And hopefully they'll understand the need to do that, or the need to work together to do that. And if they don't, you can just kind of keep chipping away with it. Again, remember, with people, slow is fast. If at first you don't succeed, just be patient and keep coming back to it. And if you do that in an authentic way, I don't think there's any risk of you being, perceived as an underminer or a bypasser or any of this weirdness that happens. And certainly if it does come up and there's some conflict, resolve it. Have the courage to do that. So thank you for that question, Darby. And let's see what other kinds of issues, questions, or scenarios we can discuss today in terms of managing 360. Okay, so Tony says, if I have one employee that's task orientated and another that's more free spirited, not task orientated at all, do you have any suggestions on them working well together? Well, first of all, yes, absolutely we do. So absolutely, first we want to bring them in together, right? And let them self-identify. Look, employee A, you're very task orientated. This means such and such. Employee B, you're free spirited. And this is, free spirits and tasks tend to collide a lot out there. The messages that we need to share with each other is like those people maps, right? To let them know that, hey, look, people kind of come at things through a different lens. This is another form of diversity we need to embrace in our organization to get high functioning teams and to build authentic relationships. So building awareness of each other's type, I think, is important. And then getting them to, use each other's language and walk in each other's shoes. There's a Lakota prayer. I spent a lot of time with Lakota people out in South Dakota earlier in my career. And there's this thing that they have that's, oh, great spirit, may I walk a day in the moccasins of my enemy before I meet them in battle. Greatly paraphrased, of course. So we want to get each of these individuals kind of walking in each other's shoes and at least some level of appreciation that people are coming at this. Then we need to address their Achilles heels. For the free spirit, it's about follow through, which the task person hates, because the free spirit's got all this wonderful creative energy, right? And they're not following through on the steps or with deadlines and things that are important on the task person. So we need to coach the free spirit to say, look, instead of being perceived as being aloof or, not able to be a team member because you can never get anything done, we want you to be perceived as being innovative and a creative, inspiring member of this team. But to do that, you've got to be able to deliver. You've got to be able to at least meet some deadlines and be communicative and at least follow the script. And when the free spirit can do that, the irony is that they'll get more opportunity to be creative and to be free spirited, because there's a level of trust that's been associated, and they'll be labeled as being innovators and problem solvers instead of being aloof. At the same time, the task person is not open to change. I mean, we've got a system. This is the way we've done it forever. Prove to me that this is an improvement over that. So we've got to get the task person to kind of loosen up a little bit, to relax and breathe, and to be able to spend some time in their day thinking creatively with that free spirit and with others about how they can bring change to the process themselves and still maintain the order out of the chaos. So we bring people together, we share their types, we get them to appreciate each other, to try and use each other's language. We work on our own personal Achilles heels, and then we come together. A lot of times when I'm having meetings and team meetings, I'll make sure that we have the opportunity to address all four types in the room, right? So we'll spend a time talking about what's the big outcomes, what's the vision, what are the things that have to be done, what's the nature of this project. Another one is, how are the people doing? Are we being sensitive to their needs? Do we have the right training in place? How are people feeling about the project? The taskers, are we taking the right steps? Are we on schedule? Are we on time? And then the free spirit, are we solving the problems or in new ways? Are we introducing new ideas to solve old things? And in doing so and running your meetings and being purposeful about it that way, you'll be able to draw out each and individual piece of diversity on your team that's around this people map, as well as other aspects of diversity, I'm sure. So there's a quick lightning round thing for you there. Hopefully that's helpful. And again, if you'd like to do more exploration on people map or do some trainings and go through some workshops, I mean, I'm happy to do it. I've taught thousands of people, and I just find this a very helpful thing. So thanks, Tony, for that scenario. Back to Donna here. Let's see. Are there any personality types that you have seen work better together or conversely don't work well together? Well, I talked about those free spirit and taskers kind of being here. Another kind of a confrontational relationship is typically leader and people types. Leader types, Achilles heel suffers from not listening. Undeveloped leaders, it's my way or the highway kind of thing, where they like to micromanage and get up in people's business. Those are all the Achilles heels of a leader type that need to be managed. And so sometimes they can appear to be very insensitive to people's needs. And the people type, kind of in the room are just kind of like, I don't know. I don't know if I can buy into that, because I feel like you're being insensitive to my needs in this change or in this particular issue. And so the leader type needs to learn patience and how to listen. The people type Achilles heel is really about choosing the easy way out sometimes. People types don't like confrontation. They'll tend to shy away from it. If something gets confrontational in a meeting, you'll see them physically disengage from the table. In Japanese culture, you see people physically disengaging from, a source of controversy or friction. And you'll see them in a meeting here too. in the United States. And I've even had people get so uncomfortable, people types get so, they have to excuse themselves from a meeting because they just don't like the confrontation. What we have to get people types over is realize that it's not confrontation, it's carefrontation. We're spending the time to care enough about the issue, to put ourselves out there, to work through the difficulties in an authentic way, and to be able to make the hard and probably not always the most popular decisions when it comes to things that are on the table. So people types and leader types tend to do that, and we need to have them help each other. Task types and free spirits tend to come together, and we need to help them understand each other and their own selves to do it. And again, the accomplished leader, when we're managing 360, creates space. And I'm trying to understand when I go to talk to my president, he's a leader people type now. I will reinforce that conversation in my head before I go have it and think about the kinds of ways in which I want to approach the conversation with him in a meaningful way. So, and of course, the same types work harmoniously together. Two people, free spirits, are going to be just fine. You never really have to worry about them. You know, if you're talking to somebody who is your particular type, right, it's a very natural conversation. You'll feel very comfortable having conversations and working with them just because you're kind of coming at it through the same lenses. So let's see, is there anything else out there? We've got about 4 minutes left. And I'm interested, you know, maybe in chat, if you don't mind, you know, putting in there, how many of you feel like you have successfully been able to manage 360, even maybe not without this kind of specific approach, but, and what do you attribute that success to? I know some of you have done it and are doing it today, but if you wouldn't mind sharing, I think that'd be great here in the last few minutes. We can learn from each other. How have you successfully managed up? And what do you attribute that success to? Or laterally, how have you successfully managed across the institutions or the organizations or the people that you need to work with, or perhaps even with customers and people who benefit from your services? Brandy shared with us being authentic. Yes. Yeah, people can see right through that generally. And when we bring our authentic selves, we don't have to make it up, right? And we can be ourselves and be authentic in that context. So thank you, Brandy. Darby says equal work on both sides, up or down, to create a communication effort that works for all parties, right? Yeah, many of the times, right, it's just a simple communication that's there. That's why we spend a lot of time now talking about People Map. Donovan provides solid information. Great. Bring your facts, bring the data, have it there ready to back up without emotion, right? If we get emotional, it's really hard for us to stay on top of that. Thank you, Donovan. We're trying to draw too many conclusions that your boss isn't ready for. That's right. Yeah, that's again, you know, when you feel the shields going up, right? You don't want to just keep hammering. You want to keep throwing ideas at the table. You know, it's time to back off and maybe get some feedback. Thank you, Donovan. Really well said. And Tony, again, see, my organization had everyone do a DISC assessment. Yeah, DISC assessments are great. It helped us all get a better idea of how we like to individually to communicate. Wonderful. It doesn't have to be People Map. DISC, True Strengths, True Colors, excuse me, Strengths Quest, any number of different types of personality measuring instruments can give you insights into how people want to communicate. So if you've been down one of those roads like DISC, that's really good. DISC is especially good when people are in stressed situations because we revert back to our kind of true and authentic self in stress situations, right? And so DISC is particularly good for working with people and knowing how to communicate during a crisis. That's great. Any other thoughts there? Okay, we're right at the end. So managing 360 is really important. We all do it, whether we realize it or not. Going back to 3 mappings, map those relationships that are important to you as you manage and think about your ability to influence people effectively in your environment 360. Identify the issues that are important to you and them, and then be considerate of how they prefer to be communicated with, and start there. You can build an authentic relationship that's going to make things a lot easier for you down the road. So Donna, I think with that, I'll hand it back to you for any closeout messages. And again, it's always a pleasure to be with you, and I look forward to the next time.
Thank you very much. That was a great presentation. I'm looking forward to getting the slide deck, and I'll share it with everyone that registered for the event. So I hope to see you all at Pi next week, or at our future events, our June webinar, or our in-person in Denver. We're doing the frontline training. Any questions, feel free to reach out to any of the board members. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.